My daughter-in-law's words sliced through the air like a knife at my grandson's graduation dinner. Her voice dripped with venom, loud enough for every head in the upscale Riverside Country Club to turn. I didn't flinch. I smiled. That's right. I smiled. Because I had been waiting for this moment for 4 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. What she didn't know was that I'd seen the lawyer's tape, the one where she said, "Tell her I'm dead. I want no contact, no complications." Not about me, about her other daughter, a daughter none of us knew existed. I'm Margaret Brown. I've buried a husband, raised a family alone, and now I'm about to unbury a secret my daughter-in-law tried to erase forever. Stay with me, because this story won't just surprise you, it will break you and then rebuild you, just like it did me. The early morning sun filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the hardwood floor of my modest home. The house creaked softly as it woke, as if sharing the anticipation that fluttered in my chest. Today wasn't just any day. It was my grandson's graduation dinner, Henry. My heart swelled at the thought of him. The boy I once bathed in a kitchen sink was now a Harvard graduate. The scent of jasmine tea wafted through my small kitchen as I stirred the pot with practiced ease. 65 years old, twice widowed, and long retired from teaching high school literature, I had found peace in routine. I lived alone now, in the same 3-bedroom house where David, my only child, had taken his first steps. The walls still held echoes of lullabies, birthday songs, and bedtime stories. Life hadn't always been easy, but it had always been mine. I'd married young, first to Robert, a kind but sickly man, taken too soon by cancer, then to George, whose sudden stroke ended our 6 short years together. After George, I never remarried. I chose instead to focus on raising David, my miracle child born after years of trying and caring for George's ailing parents until their final days. I gave up promotions and pay raises, PTA events and book clubs, not because anyone asked me to, but because it was what family did. At least that's what I believed. When David met Lauren, he was already a young architect on the rise. She swept into our lives like a gust of cold air, elegant, poised, and utterly uninterested in small talk. She reminded me of the women in glossy magazines. Flawless skin, measured words, and the kind of gaze that calculated worth in under 10 seconds. Still, I tried. I gave her my grandmother's pearl brooch on their wedding day, offered Sunday dinners, and always stood beside her during baby showers and holidays. When Henry was born, my heart cracked wide open again. He had David's smile and Lauren's eyes, and for a brief while, I believed I could find a place in this new version of our family. Lauren went back to work just 4 weeks after giving birth, and I offered, no, insisted, on watching Henry during the day. I left my job with only a thank you cake and a few hugs from students, trading lesson plans for lullabies and grading papers for diaper changes. Those early years were some of the hardest and most rewarding of my life. I was no stranger to sacrifice, but loving Henry made everything else seem small by comparison. He was a curious child, always asking questions, always wanting to know why. We'd build blanket forts and read under them for hours, his tiny voice repeating lines from Charlotte's Web or A Wrinkle in Time. Now, at 22, he was taller than David, more driven than I'd ever been, and as compassionate as his grandfather Robert had once been. He was graduating Harvard Law with honors and had earned every bit of it. Not through privilege, though Lauren liked to pretend her family connections mattered, but through hard work. Summers working construction, winters tutoring freshmen, and countless late nights fueled by coffee and ambition. Tonight, we would celebrate at the Riverside Country Club. Lauren's choice, of course. She'd booked the venue months in advance, ensuring the menu was gluten-free, the flower arrangements tastefully minimal, and the guest list free of anyone who might wear rhinestones. I didn't mind. I'd already picked out my navy dress, ironed it twice, and laid it on the bed with a matching shawl. As I placed my tea on the windowsill, I looked out at the garden I'd planted when David was 5. The hydrangeas were blooming early this year. A good omen, I told myself. I thought about the speech I might give if asked. Something short, heartfelt. Maybe I'd mention how proud his grandfather would be. Maybe I'd simply say, "Thank you for letting me be part of your journey." I took a deep breath, calming the nervous flutter in my chest. This night, this moment, it wasn't about me. It was about Henry. And if Lauren gave me that look, the one that silently begged me to remain invisible, I'd ignore it, as I had for years. Because tonight wasn't about the tensions that simmered beneath the surface. Tonight was about love, legacy, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, I'd finally done something right. The Riverside Country Club glistened beneath the evening lights, all polished silverware and carefully placed floral centerpieces. Waiters glided between white linen tables with the poise of stage performers. Henry's graduation dinner was in full swing, and every detail reflected Lauren's unyielding standards, from the imported French cheese to the name cards written in calligraphy. I sat beside Henry, trying not to fidget with the napkin in my lap. He looked radiant in his navy blue suit, his eyes alight with the triumph of youth. Every now and then, he leaned over to whisper something funny, and I laughed, my heart full. Around us, guests mingled, colleagues of David and Lauren, old friends, a few extended family members I barely recognized. This was her world, clean, curated, and impossibly expensive. "Grandma," Henry said, raising his glass of sparkling cider in mock ceremony, "you know none of this would have happened without you, right?" A hush fell across our table. "I mean it," he went on, oblivious to the sudden shift in atmosphere. "You stayed with me all those summers when I was little. You taught me to read before I even started school. You gave up everything so I could grow up feeling safe, like I mattered." I smiled and touched his arm, willing myself not to cry. "You believed in me before anyone else did. So this," he gestured to the room, "this is your celebration too." I opened my mouth to respond, but a voice interrupted before I could speak. "Well," Lauren said, swirling her wine glass with deliberate care, "let's not turn this into a fairy tale." Her words cut through the warmth like an unexpected gust of cold wind. The clink of silverware paused. Conversation at the next table quieted. My hand froze mid-reach for my glass. Henry blinked, confused. "Mom? I'm just saying," she continued, smiling that thin, polished smile that never reached her eyes. "We all contributed in our own way. You had excellent schools, tutors, mentors. It wasn't just bedtime stories and peanut butter sandwiches." Her tone was light, even pleasant, but underneath, I heard it clearly, the dismissal, the reframing of history, the cold smile in a warm room. David glanced at her, a slight crease forming between his brows. "Lauren." "Oh, relax," she said, brushing invisible lint from her silk blouse. "I'm just reminding everyone this wasn't a one-woman show." I nodded slightly, careful to keep my expression neutral. I'd seen this before. The subtle reassertion of dominance, the veiled suggestion that my presence was tolerated, not celebrated. And yet it was the timing that unsettled me. Why now? Why here? Henry's smile faltered. He looked at me, his eyes apologizing for a wound he hadn't caused. "I wasn't trying to." I squeezed his hand. "I know, sweetheart, and I'm proud of you. That's all that matters." He nodded, but the brightness in his eyes had dimmed just a little. The mood at the table shifted, just enough for the warmth to slip away like steam from a teacup. As the waitstaff brought out the dessert, a delicate tower of creme brulee with spun sugar, I caught Lauren watching me from across the table. Her gaze was unreadable, but something flickered behind it. Not malice exactly. No, this was something colder, more calculated. She raised her glass and offered me a smile, a perfect practice smile. I smiled back, but inside my stomach turned. Something was off. Something had shifted tonight, and I didn't yet understand what it was. It was more than rivalry, more than the usual friction between two women from different eras, different values. There was an edge to her now, a sharpness I hadn't seen before. Later, as guests began to drift toward the bar or gather in clusters for photos, I excused myself and stepped outside onto the terrace. The night air was crisp, scented with jasmine and the faint smell of chlorine from the country club's nearby pool. I leaned on the railing, trying to breathe. Inside, laughter and jazz music floated through the open doors. A moment ago, I'd been filled with pride and joy. Now, unease curled in my chest like smoke. Not because of what Lauren said. God knows I'd survived worse. But because of how she said it. It hadn't been careless or spontaneous. It had been planned. A precision strike. I watched the stars blink above the manicured lawn and wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders. Something was coming. I didn't know what, but my instincts, sharpened over decades of quiet sacrifices and silent battles, were screaming at me to pay attention. Back inside, the party swirled on, unaware. But I knew. The evening had started with celebration, but it ended with something else. A beginning of an unraveling. And though no one else could see it yet, I felt it like a drop in temperature. The warmth was fading. Something dark was moving beneath the surface. The dinner was winding down. Plates had been cleared, wine glasses refilled, and the background jazz had softened to an elegant murmur. Henry, flushed with happiness and pride, stood at the head of the table, a dessert fork in one hand and his glass in the other. "I know we've all had a lot to drink," he said with a grin, "but I just want to say one more thing before the night gets away from us." A ripple of polite laughter circled the table, cameras tilted toward him, anticipating another heartfelt moment. "I want to thank everyone for being here," he continued. "But most of all, I want to thank the one person who's been there from the very beginning, my grandma." My breath caught. Henry looked down at me, his voice steady but warm. "You gave up your career, your time, probably your sanity, to make sure I had everything I needed. You never once made me feel like a burden. You've always been my foundation, my compass. I am who I am because of you." I blinked hard. Around the table, guests nodded. A few even touched their napkins to the corners of their eyes. Then came the sound of a chair scraping back. Lauren rose from her seat slowly, deliberately, the pale lavender satin of her designer dress shimmering in the low light. For a heartbeat, I thought she might be moved to say something kind. She wasn't. "Let's not rewrite history tonight, shall we?" she said with a brittle smile. The room stilled. The background music continued, a soft saxophone note trailing into silence. Henry frowned. "Mom?" Lauren didn't look at him. Her eyes were locked on me. "It's sweet, really. The way everyone likes to pretend Margaret's sacrifices were all selfless. But let's be honest here. She didn't do all this out of nobility." David shifted in his seat. "Lauren, maybe this isn't—" "No, it is," she cut in. "It is the time. Because I'm tired of pretending. Every event, every dinner, we parade her around like some saint. But you know what I see? I see a woman who clings to her role as martyr, because it's the only identity she has left." My heart thudded once, heavy and hard. Lauren's voice grew sharper. "She talks too loud in public, dresses like she's headed to a church rummage sale, and acts like we should all bow down just because she changed a few diapers 20 years ago." Someone near the bar gasped. Silverware stilled midair. Even the staff froze. "And frankly," Lauren continued, her voice icy now, "you embarrass me, Margaret. Every single time we're out, I have to explain away your outdated views, your awkward manners, your thrift store wardrobe. You're a burden, not a blessing." I sat perfectly still. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just folded my hands in my lap and stared at the woman I had welcomed into my family, the woman who had just stripped me bare in front of 40 guests. Henry's face had gone pale. "Mom, what the hell?" "Henry, she needed to hear it." "No, she didn't." His voice cracked. "Nobody did." Lauren turned to him finally. "You think this woman is your hero? She's a relic, Henry, a drain on our lives, and someone had to say it." Silence. Thick. Unbreathable. My hands trembled just slightly beneath the tablecloth. I felt the weight of every eye in the room. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others stared at me with pity, their expressions unreadable. My chest ached. Not from humiliation, but from something deeper, something more dangerous, a feeling I hadn't allowed myself in years, anger. But still, I didn't speak. I looked at Lauren and I smiled, not with my mouth, but with my eyes. That cold, calm kind of smile that comes when you've been underestimated one too many times. Lauren faltered. And in that hesitation, I saw it, the flicker of doubt, of fear. Because I hadn't cried. I hadn't begged or run from the room. I'd done the one thing she didn't expect. I'd stayed. David finally stood, his voice soft. "Lauren, that was out of line." She turned to him. "Was it? Or is it just that someone finally said what everyone's been thinking?" He didn't answer. That, more than Lauren's words, shattered me. Not her cruelty, but his silence. Because deep down, some part of me had believed, after everything, I could count on my son to defend me, to stop the bleeding. Instead, he looked at me and said nothing. And in that moment, the air left my lungs. I sat still. While whispers began to ripple through the room like wind through tall grass, I folded my napkin slowly, placed it beside my plate, and reached for my handbag. My fingers found the small remote inside. No trembling, just certainty. I caught the eye of Marcus, the senior waiter who had served our family at this club for years. With a simple nod, barely perceptible, I gave the signal. He blinked once in acknowledgement, then moved toward the bar. Lauren, meanwhile, had retaken her seat, or rather, collapsed into it. Her face was flushed, chest rising and falling fast, as if even she wasn't sure how far she'd just gone. Henry sat frozen, knuckles white around his glass. David had yet to look me in the eye. It took 10 seconds. The jazz music faded mid-note. Conversation stuttered to a halt. Then the speakers, embedded discreetly into the ceiling, began playing a new sound. Silence at first, then the mechanical click of a camera activating. Every head turned toward the TV mounted above the bar, the same screen usually reserved for golf tournaments or club announcements. Now it showed a woman in a white blouse and pearl earrings. Lauren. The room collectively inhaled. She sat in what was clearly a lawyer's office. Modern, minimal, sterile. A tall man in a dark gray suit sat across from her, a notepad in hand. "So you're sure you want to go through with this?" his voice asked. Lauren's voice was crisp, cold. "Absolutely. I don't want her in my life. I don't want her in Henry's life. As far as I'm concerned, Margaret Brown is not family." The crowd gasped audibly. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered softly on the carpeted floor. On the screen, Lauren leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Tell her I'm dead if needed. I want no contact, no visitation, nothing." The lawyer nodded slowly. "That's legally enforceable, but it's irreversible." "Good," Lauren said. "That's the point." Back in the banquet hall, the silence was a vacuum. You could hear the sound of people shifting uncomfortably, of disbelief clicking into place. Lauren stared at the screen, mouth slightly open. "Turn that off!" she shrieked suddenly, lunging from her seat. But Marcus had positioned himself between her and the AV controls. Calm, professional, unmovable. "Turn it off!" she yelled again, more desperate now. No one moved. Then it happened. Her knees buckled and she collapsed into the nearest chair, the satin of her gown bunching awkwardly beneath her. Her face had lost all color. She looked like someone drowning in front of a silent crowd. The screen went black. I stood. For the first time all night. And the room, dozens of eyes, ears, and judgmental hearts, turned to face me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scream. I simply said, "That recording was taken 6 months ago." I received it from a private investigator after a concerned friend told me they'd seen Lauren leaving a family law office. People began to murmur. "Some of you may think I overstepped, invaded her privacy, betrayed my family's trust." I paused, letting the words settle. But Lauren didn't just insult me tonight. She didn't just humiliate me in front of my grandson. She planned to erase me, to legally sever me from Henry's life, to lie, if needed, and tell me she was dead, just to avoid ever seeing me again. Lauren was crying now, her face buried in trembling hands. Henry looked ill. David still hadn't spoken. I have spent my entire adult life giving, to my son, to my grandson, to this family. I gave up a career. I buried 2 husbands, I changed diapers, paid bills, cooked meals, stayed up nights with fevers and nightmares. I looked at Henry, and this time I let them see the fire. But I will not be erased. A beat. I did not ask to be worshipped. I only asked to be seen. The room was utterly still. That was the moment, right there, when something shifted. Not just in the room, in me. All my life, I'd been the quiet one, the dependable one, the accommodating woman who stepped aside for younger voices, for sharper suits, for louder opinions. But tonight, I stood, and they listened. 6 months before the night Lauren collapsed in satin, I was walking home from my weekly volunteer shift at the library when I saw her. She didn't see me. Of course she didn't. She was too busy straightening her coat as she stepped out of a building downtown, the glass doors gleaming under the late morning sun. I stood still, partially hidden by a line of cherry trees, watching. It was a law office. Family law. Lauren paused on the steps, pulled out her phone, and spoke into it with clipped efficiency. Then she disappeared into her car, a sleek black hybrid that pulled away like nothing in the world could touch her. But something touched me. That office. That particular specialty. And Lauren, always so composed, emerging from it with a flicker of something. Guilt? Triumph? Something not quite right. That night, I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I called a number I never thought I'd use again. Frank Delgado, a retired detective who had once helped a friend of mine uncover a fraudulent caregiver. He worked quietly, asked few questions, and believed in evidence, not emotion. "I don't want you to follow her," I said carefully. "Just tell me why someone like her might visit a family law office, and if there's something I should know." Frank didn't blink. "Give me a week." It took 5 days. He showed up at my kitchen door with a folder thicker than I'd expected. "She has a daughter," he said, before even sitting down. I stared at him. "What?" "Lauren, or rather Lauren Walker, her maiden name, had a daughter, Emily Walker, born when she was 20, father unknown, raised the girl alone for 15 years. Then, she disappeared." "Disappeared?" "Signed over her rights, voluntarily. Claimed she needed a clean break to start a new family. That was 9 years ago." The room tilted. Frank opened the folder and laid out the documents. Custody papers, a notarized petition for termination of parental rights, social worker evaluations. She told the court she was leaving to build a new life, that she didn't want her daughter interfering. "She left her?" I whispered. "On purpose?" Frank nodded. Emily went to live with her maternal grandmother, woman in her late 70s, ill health. 2 years later, the grandmother died. Emily entered foster care at 17, aged out at 18. I stared at the paper. A single paragraph glared back at me. No future contact desired, no obligation of visitation or support. "She's 24 now," Frank continued, "works 2 jobs in Portland, nighttime security and part-time barista, putting herself through community college. No record, no priors, no known relatives." "Where is she?" I asked softly. Frank passed me a photo. A young woman walking across a dimly lit parking lot at night, a backpack slung over her shoulder. Tired eyes, thin frame, wearing a uniform. "She's got your grandson's jawline," Frank said gently, "but none of his privileges." I held the photo in trembling hands. This girl, this forgotten daughter, had once called Lauren Mom. Lauren, who now sat at the head of my family's table, curating holiday menus and orchestrating graduations. Lauren, who cut me down with polished cruelty, while her own past lay buried under court stamps and closed doors. "She's never mentioned her," I said. "Not once." "She erased her," Frank replied, "legally and emotionally." The word landed like a blow. Erased. That evening, I sat alone with the folder, reading every document, every line of legal indifference that had condemned a child to vanish. I thought about Emily walking cold Portland streets at night, guarding buildings full of strangers while her own family toasted champagne in banquet halls. I thought about Henry, so adored, so supported, and wondered how love could be so selectively dispensed. I thought about Lauren's smile, the way it never quite reached her eyes, and I knew. This wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. 2 days after Frank handed me the folder, he returned. I wasn't going to dig deeper, he said, removing his hat respectfully as he stepped into my kitchen. But something didn't sit right, so I followed up on the investigator Emily hired when she was 19. Emily hired an investigator? He nodded. Paid with money she saved from her cafe job. She was trying to find her mother. Thought maybe Lauren had lost touch unintentionally. The girl never believed the abandonment was deliberate. I swallowed hard. And what did she find? That's the thing. Nothing. Dead end. Until he came back with a death certificate. I blinked. What? Frank laid the document on my table. A copy of a state-issued death certificate bearing Lauren's maiden name. Lauren Walker, date of death 5 years earlier, cause vehicular accident, signed by a physician that no longer practiced in the state. She faked her own death? Frank nodded grimly. Had someone file it under a different county, enough to confuse records? Paid a woman, used to be her cleaning lady, to spread the story around town if anyone asked. The room tilted again, harder this time. To ensure no one came looking, he added. She didn't just abandon the girl, she buried herself, at least on paper. I pressed my palms to the table. Why would someone go that far? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I already knew she wasn't just building a new life. She was scrubbing the old one clean. Emily wasn't a daughter to her. She was a loose thread, a liability. That night, Frank returned with one last thing, a USB drive. I wasn't going to show you this, he said, handing it to me, but you deserve to know exactly who you're dealing with. The video was grainy. Security footage from a law office. Lauren speaking to her attorney. She looked polished, composed, efficient. She's a mistake, Lauren was saying. I was young and stupid. I don't want her finding me. She's baggage. Emotional clutter. I've come too far to let that ruin what I have now. Her voice was ice. I want a clean slate, she added. Make it permanent. And if anyone ever comes looking, just tell them I'm dead. She'll believe it. She always did want to think the best of people. I paused the footage, stared at her frozen image on the screen. A mother talking about her daughter like discarded furniture. A woman who used to sit at my table, toast birthdays, and ask me to pass the cranberry sauce on Thanksgiving. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just felt still. Then something shifted. Not fury, not vengeance, clarity. I would not confront her. I would not stoop to her tactics. No late-night calls, no teary accusations. No, Lauren would reveal herself. She had already set the fire. All I needed to do was let the match fall. And yet, even as resolve settled into my bones, a different kind of unease crept under my skin. Because as I sat at my desk late that evening, sorting through Frank's notes and saving documents for safekeeping, I noticed something unusual. A new email. Subject: Margaret Brown, Records Inquiry. The sender address was unfamiliar but professional looking. No message, just an attachment request blocked by my email settings. I frowned. The next morning, another one came, this time with a short line of text, requesting confirmation of prior employment and family medical history. I hadn't applied for anything. I hadn't volunteered that information, which meant only one thing. Someone was looking into me. And not just anyone. Someone who knew exactly where to dig. 2 days after the dinner debacle at Riverside, my phone began ringing in ways that had nothing to do with congratulations or concern. The first was Margaret Sims, a woman I'd played bridge with every Thursday for over a decade. I just wanted to hear your side, she said cautiously, as if I might explode at any moment. There's a lot going around. What's going around? I asked. She hesitated. Then, that you staged it. That you embarrassed your own family to get back at Lauren. That maybe you've always resented her. I nearly dropped the kettle. That afternoon, I received 3 more calls, all wrapped in sympathy, all weighted with doubt. Each person repeated variations of the same phrase. She always spoke so highly of you. Lauren. I should have known she wouldn't vanish quietly. No, her defense wasn't retreat. It was counterattack. And her weapon of choice? Innocence. The next morning, the local women's book club removed me from the upcoming rotation. No explanation, just a polite email about scheduling adjustments. Then at the grocery store, I passed Helen Clark, the pastor's wife, who offered me a strained smile before quickly changing aisles. It was the smile that undid me. I stood frozen between the yogurt and the butter, breath caught somewhere between fury and heartbreak. Because now, I was the villain. I, who had given up jobs and sleep and social life to raise my son, to help my grandson. I, who had paid for Lauren's IVF when she couldn't conceive for years, who had cleaned her bathroom when she was on bed rest, who had held her hair back when she vomited during chemo, even though she told no one else she was ill. I, who had remained silent through every snide remark, every backhanded compliment, every quiet dismissal. And now I was the problem. I was still in that fog when the phone rang again, this time with a number I hadn't seen in months. "Hi, Mom." My heart lifted. Sarah, my youngest. Living in Oregon now, raising twins with her wife, Lena. She hadn't been at the graduation. I'd assumed she was too busy. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice softening. But her tone wasn't soft. It was tight, controlled. "Mom, I've been getting calls from the family, from cousins, from David." I braced myself. "What happened at Henry's party? Did you really play some video in front of everyone? About Lauren?" "She played the part of a loving wife while erasing her own child," I said quietly. "I exposed the truth." Sarah exhaled sharply. "But in public? At Henry's graduation? You made it about you." "No, Sarah, I made it about her, about what she's capable of. She told David you've never liked her, that you've always looked for ways to undermine her. Did she also tell him she faked her death to her own daughter?" Silence. "She says that's not true, that you misunderstood what the video showed." I closed my eyes. "Mom," Sarah continued, "I'm just trying to understand. Are you trying to destroy David's family?" That was the blow. Not from strangers, not from book club friends or polite neighbors, but from my own child, my flesh and blood, asking if I was out to ruin her brother. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because what do you say when your own daughter sees you not as a truth teller, but as a saboteur? That night, I sat at my kitchen table and counted the chairs around it. How many people had sat there over the years? How many of them now believed Lauren's carefully curated sob story? I looked at the photos on the mantle. Birthdays, weddings, Christmas mornings. I wondered how many memories were real and how many were merely well-lit illusions. Lauren hadn't just attacked me with gossip. She had rewritten my legacy. The cafe David picked was on Elm Street, neutral territory as he called it. I arrived 15 minutes early, choosing the table farthest from the windows. I needed privacy, even if I no longer had protection. He walked in exactly on time, his gait brisk, posture tight. When he sat down across from me, he didn't reach for the menu. He didn't ask how I was. He folded his hands and went straight in. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything." I nodded, bracing. "And I need to say this, whether you were right or not, the way you handled it, the public shaming, that was unforgivable." I didn't speak. He leaned forward, tone low, careful. "You humiliated my wife. You humiliated me. You turned Henry's night into a spectacle." I looked at my son, the boy I raised through 2 jobs, the man I helped climb out of debt when his firm hit trouble. I looked at the worry lines near his eyes, the tiredness that came not from work, but from choosing between 2 narratives, mine and hers. "David," I said finally, "I didn't want to hurt you. I only wanted the truth out." He shook his head. "You ambushed us. You made our lives a headline. Do you know what it's like trying to explain that to Henry's professors, his friends?" His voice caught. "I thought you were better than this," he whispered. And there it was. Not just the accusation, but the betrayal underneath it. I didn't cry. I sat still, spine straight, fingers wrapped tight around a mug of tea gone cold, because I had grown used to being misunderstood. My whole life had been about choosing silence over confrontation, about smoothing over what hurt, because other people's comfort always mattered more. But this time, the silence felt heavier, like wet wool, like something I'd never shake off. "I love you," I said, voice soft. "But you don't have all the pieces." "I have enough," he replied. When he stood to leave, he paused briefly. "I just need time." I watched him walk out into the street, blend into traffic and strangers. At home, the house greeted me with its usual silence. The kettle whistled too loudly in the empty kitchen. The clock ticked with too much judgment. I made soup and couldn't eat it. Folded laundry I didn't remember washing. And then, at 8:47 p.m., the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Not anymore. Peering through the peephole, I saw her, small, young, shoulders tense, a backpack slung over one arm, auburn hair tied back, eyes alert. She looked like someone halfway between sleep and battle. I opened the door. "Mrs. Brown?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "My name is Emily Walker," she said. "I think we need to talk." I stared. My heart didn't beat faster. It stopped altogether. She noticed my reaction and added quickly, "I'm not here to cause problems. I just found out someone was looking into me, digging through my past, and when I tracked the investigator, he led back to you." I stepped aside. "Come in." In the living room, she looked around, eyes pausing on family photos, her fingers twitching nervously as she settled onto the edge of the couch. "I know you're Lauren's mother-in-law," she said carefully, "and I know she doesn't talk about me, but I've lived most of my life wondering what I did wrong to deserve being left behind." She pulled out her phone and opened a photo. "This is the only picture I have of us together. I was 6. She took me to a pumpkin patch. That was the last time she held my hand." I didn't know what to say. "I'm not asking for anything," Emily continued. "I just want to understand why someone from her current life is suddenly interested in mine." I took a breath and began. I told her about the video, the documents, the night at Riverside. I told her about Frank and the folder and the cold words Lauren had used in the lawyer's office. When I finished, she didn't cry. She didn't even blink. She just nodded. "I always suspected," she said quietly, "but having it confirmed, that's something else." She looked up, her eyes locking onto mine. "Mrs. Brown, you didn't have to get involved, so why did you?" I hesitated, then answered honestly, "Because no one else did." Emily Walker sat across from me at my old oak kitchen table, the evening sun slipping behind curtains as though it were desperate to vanish from what was unfolding inside. I slid a mug of chamomile tea toward her, the kind she used to drink as a child when she fell asleep under my roof before her mother's disappearance. A half-finished plate of oatmeal cookies sat between us, crumbs lingering like memories that refused to evaporate. She cradled her tea, eyes distant. "I started searching for her when I was 19. She began, voice almost a whisper. "I hired someone from a community clinic, scraped together savings. I worked nights as a barista just to afford him." She paused, blinking back something I couldn't yet name. Pain? Loss? Resignation? "I thought she must have had a reason," Emily continued, her gaze falling to her lap. "Cancer, mental illness, something. When the investigator came back with the paperwork and the death certificate, I was relieved. To believe she needed to be gone, to think she might have had no choice." She closed her eyes for a moment and drew in a shaky breath. "But it was a lie my mother arranged." Silence wrapped around us. The smell of tea filled the room, calming but hollow. When she looked up again, there were tears glistening in her lashes. I cried for days, not because I believed she was dead, but because I didn't know I'd been raised by strangers in foster care until the age of 15. Her voice cracked. "I thought she might have forgotten me, but this was deliberate." I squeezed her hand. "I'm so sorry, Emily. No child should grow up thinking their mother chose their death." She blinked until her eyes cleared. "There was one moment when I turned 18, I thought about reaching out. But I believed the death certificate. I believed the funeral, even though I never attended it. I believed it because I needed something real." A hollow laugh escaped her. "She made sure we all believed it." My heart shattered again, knowing she had believed in a lie so profound it became her identity. Henry doesn't know yet, I said quietly. Not in detail. He heard Lauren's version before we showed him the video. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. Does he believe it? I sighed. He's confused, hurt. But he's his grandmother's grandson. I think he wants to believe in truth. She leaned forward, eyes studying me. Tell me what you showed him. I recounted the scene. Lauren's accusations at the graduation dinner, the video revealing Lauren's words. Tell her I'm dead. She's baggage. Henry's pale face, the silence that followed. I described the look in his eyes when Lauren collapsed. The shift in air when I stood up. And after? Emily asked softly. After, I said. He held me outside on the terrace and said he didn't know what kind of grandmother I was until tonight, whether vulnerable or brave. I paused, remembering the ache. He said something about how proud he is I stayed, that I didn't disappear. Tears glistened in Emily's eyes now. That means everything to both of us. She folded her hands over mine. Margaret, I never hated you. I never even thought about you much. Just the idea of a mother who took me to a pumpkin patch and then vanished. Her voice cracked. I just want to meet him. Henry? I asked. Emily nodded. If he's willing. My throat tightened. He is. She looked around the kitchen. These were the walls of her almost past, these rooms where she had never lived, memories she had never made under this roof. I remembered the stack of photo albums in the living room shelf. Would you like to see something? I asked, and went to fetch the first album with toddlers in powder blue pajamas, birthday cake smeared over smiling faces. I recognize that cake, Emily murmured, tracing a toddler Henry grabbing frosting. Is that... My youngest. That was when he turned 1. I paused. This is the last photo of you and Lauren, taken at a fall festival. You were 6. Emily's breath hitched as she saw herself, small, innocent, hand in hand with her mother, both smiling at the camera. It was the last good day, she said after minutes, before the silence. Sometimes grief doesn't come on the first visit. Sometimes it settles in over time. I watched Emily sitting quietly, tears pooling but not spilling. I understood. The grief she needed most might not arrive until later. Then she clasped the photo to her chest. Thank you, she said finally, not just for telling me, but for believing in me first. I squeezed her hand again, believing in us. Silence fell. Then Emily stood, clutching the photograph. I should rest, she said softly. This is a lot. I nodded and walked her to the door. When she paused in the hallway, she turned. Will you tell him I'm here? She whispered. I will. At the door, she paused again, then took a steadying breath. When I do, ask him to look at me as he looked at you tonight. I nodded, fighting tears. I will. She walked down the path into the dark, clutching the photo like a talisman. I watched until she was gone, the night's hush wrapping around the house. I closed and locked the door, sliding the chain latch into place. Inside, I stood for a moment in the dark kitchen, thinking about what came next. The child once erased. The family soon to be revealed. From martyr to monster, she thought. But I was something else. I was witness. And now, I would help keep watch. Morning light filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor. Emily sat at the table, tracing the rim of her teacup with one finger. Her eyes were less red than last night, but the bruises from her story still lingered in her expression. I sat across from her, the silence between us no longer heavy, just full. It was the silence of two people who had said the important things, but were still gathering the courage for what came next. Emily finally spoke, her voice low. I'm not here to claim anything, you know. Not inheritance, not status, not revenge. I blinked at her. Then, why did you come? She looked up, her eyes steady. To warn him. Henry? I asked. She nodded. I didn't speak. I let her explain. My mother loved me once, she said. When I was a child, she read to me every night. She packed my lunch for school with those little notes. You know the kind. Have a great day, pumpkin. A soft smile tugged at her lips, then fell away. And then one day I started asking questions about my dad, about why we moved so much, about the fights she had with Grandma. She took a shaky breath, and suddenly I was inconvenient. A weight, something she didn't want to carry anymore. My heart clenched. She didn't say it to my face, but I felt it, Emily continued. Less eye contact, shorter hugs, more time working late that became days gone. Then one day, she didn't come back at all. I reached out, placing my hand over hers. She didn't flinch. I don't know Henry, she said, but I can guess how much she praises him, how often she calls him her pride and joy. I know that script. I nodded slowly. She presents herself as the perfect mother. Emily's gaze was sharp, until she's not. The weight of that truth landed hard. Margaret, she said quietly, I don't want to take anything from him. I just want to look him in the eye and say, you are not safe from her just because she needs you now. I stared at her. That's a powerful truth. And a lonely one, she whispered. I stood, moving to the counter. As I poured fresh coffee, I gathered my courage. There's a barbecue this Saturday, I said over my shoulder, at David's house, supposed to be a healing event, family only. Emily looked up. You think I should go? I think, I said, placing the cup in front of her, that the only thing stronger than a lie is standing in the room it was designed to erase. She looked at me for a long time, then she nodded. I'm not going to ask her to love me again, she said. That ship sank years ago. I smiled softly. Then why go? She held my gaze. To reclaim my story. If she's told 1,000 lies about me, I want to speak one truth where it matters most. I took her hand again. Then we'll go together. A pause. I've got a simple dress, she said. Blue, not fancy. It'll be perfect. We spent the day preparing not just clothes, but hearts. I showed her more albums. We mapped the names and faces she'd soon confront. I coached her on the layout of the house, the likely positions of sympathizers. You might be met with silence, I warned, people frozen by uncertainty. I'm used to silence, she said calmly. That night, as she prepared for bed in the guest room, she paused in the hallway. Margaret, she asked softly, if this goes badly, will it still have been worth it? I met her eyes. Truth is always worth it. Even when it breaks things, she smiled. Then I'm ready to break some things. And with that, the girl who had once been erased closed her door gently behind her. Not to hide, but to rest before the storm. The afternoon sun danced through the maple leaves as the family gathered in David's backyard. White folding chairs encircled picnic tables heaped with homemade dishes. Laughter drifted through the air, the scent of barbecue and fresh-cut grass mingling in a tapestry of well-meaning domesticity. Lauren oversaw the setup, clipboard in hand, a silent conductor orchestrating her vision of healing. She moved with purposeful grace, unsettlingly composed. Every detail reflected her image of perfection. Pastel tablecloths, wine glasses polished to a shine, name tags that read, Beloved Mother, Proud Grandmother, and I'd say, Our Precious Henry. My heart thumped in my chest as I stood at the edge of the gathering, Emily at my side. She wore a simple blue dress, as agreed, relaxed, authentic, not flashy, just real. Henry bounded toward us, bright-eyed and beaming. Grandma Emily, come here! He grabbed Emily's hand, his forehead nestled against hers in a shy, brotherly gesture. This is my sister, he said, voice loud and earnest. I felt time freeze. The chatter stuttered. Awkward smiles, shifting feet, whispered questions. Lauren halted mid-pour, her smile flickering as she noticed the two of us at the center. Honey, where... she started, voice force pleasant. I stepped forward. Lauren, I said, calm but firm. May I introduce someone? Lauren's mask slipped for a second, a sharpened inhale. She recovered. "Margaret's friend?" she said, as if noticing me for the first time. "She's my daughter." A beat. A gasp. I nodded at Emily. Henry's face mirrored realizations. "Mom?" he said softly. Emily took a gentle step forward. "I'm Emily Walker. We met last night." Lauren paled so visibly that onlookers gasped again. Her clipboard clattered to the ground. "I have some documents you should see," Emily said, pulling papers from her purse. She held up a birth certificate in crisp white and blue. "It says I'm the child of Lauren Walker, born March 15th, 2001. Lauren's mouth opened and closed once. She made no sound. Next, Emily laid down a stack of legal forms, a relinquishment of parental rights petition signed and submitted 17 years ago. One cousin gasped. A cousin I had thought friendly. Emily paused, then showed another small envelope, an official death certificate, filed 5 years ago under a slightly altered name, stamped by the state medical board. She lifted it. "My mother faked my death. She paid someone to make this official, to erase me from records, because I was inconvenient." Another silence. The leaves overhead held their breath. Henry stood rigid at her side. His eyes darted between Emily and Lauren, struggling to comprehend. I looked at him and saw something fierce spark in his eyes, a need for truth, for clarity. Lauren finally found her voice. It was raw. "Those documents, those were mistakes. There were reasons. I was under pressure." Emily shook her head slowly. "I don't want explanations, Linda. I want the truth." Lauren, calling herself by her maiden name as if trying to reclaim an identity, turned to me. "Margaret, how could you? You invited her here?" "She's my daughter," I said evenly, "and my family deserves to know her." Lauren's eyes burned. "Yes, but..." She hesitated, voice faltering. "You knew what you were doing." I swallowed. "I knew what needed to be done." Emily stepped to Henry. "I just want you to meet me. I'm not here to break your life. I'm here to live it, with truth between us." Henry stared for a long moment, his brows furrowed, then he exhaled slowly. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's talk." He pulled out a chair next to Emily and sat down. Guests shifted uneasily. Lauren sank behind them like a shadow. I glanced at my son, hoping for a sign. He didn't look at me. He looked at Henry, quietly studying his sister. A ripple of conversation began, questions aimed at Emily, tentative offers of food, cautious acceptance. In that moment, I felt the heat of pride. I didn't erase her. I revealed her. Truth sat at the table, and for a second, everything was still. The backyard gathering had lost its polished veneer. Where once there was chatter and music, there was now a tense hush. Lauren, her composure frayed, rose to speak. "He's not your brother," she declared, voice strained, forcing authority. "Emily is troubled, unstable. She had issues, addiction, depression. You all knew nothing about her." A ripple of murmurs greeted her. Some nodded. Some looked uneasy. Emily remained calm. She reached into her purse and withdrew a manila folder. "Let's talk facts," she said evenly. She handed a stack of papers to Henry and then to David. "This is my transcript. Straight A's in school from freshman year to graduation. Academic awards." She tapped a certificate bearing the community college seal. "Dean's List honors student. I didn't become what she says I am." Silence rippled again. Lauren's face drained of color. "I was trying to protect you," she stammered. "There were complications, things you don't understand." Emily shook her head. "No, you destroyed records, lied to courts, and ordered people to erase me from existence, all to protect your image." And at that moment, David stood, tall, silent, a presence tempered by betrayal. "Lauren," he began, voice controlled. He looked at her with the kind of clarity only devastation brings. "I am no attorney, but there's a clause in our prenup. If either spouse commits material misrepresentation of character, the marriage can be dissolved without financial obligation." Lauren's eyes widened, panic surfacing. "You wouldn't," she whispered. He nodded. "I will." You chose to lie about your child. You erased her. You let her suffer. There's no reconciliation without truth. Some guests gasped. Others shifted uncomfortably. A few silently began packing to leave. As Lauren looked around for support, she found none. The same relatives who once praised her perfect life now glanced at her with something akin to shame. But I didn't feel triumph. I only felt warmth. Quiet, gentle, like revival. I stood and walked to Emily. She looked up at me, uncertainty flickering. I didn't say anything at first. I just held her. "I'm so sorry you ever doubted your worth," I whispered into her ear. She rested her head on my shoulder. "Thank you," she said, voice muffled. She looked up at me. "Can I call you something?" I smiled softly. "You already do, Grandma." Something in me cracked open then, an ache of love, forgiveness, belonging. Later that afternoon, David and Henry approached us, both looking fragile, changed. Henry offered Emily a half smile. "Sister, not half," he said softly. I felt tears well behind my eyes. I squeezed him and whispered, "Welcome to the family." Emily stood between us and looked around the backyard, now half empty, littered with half-eaten food and abandoned chairs, but her gaze was steady. "A year ago, none of this existed," she finally said. "But here we are." I grabbed her hand. "Here we are," I echoed, and I held that truth with all the weight of a lifetime. 6 months later, Emily had moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment a few miles away. She transferred to a university nearby and maintained her 2 jobs until financial aid kicked in. Every Sunday evening, she joined me for dinner, sometimes leftovers from David's house, sometimes my cooking experiments. She brought wine once, but only after making sure it paired with what I had. The transformation wasn't about replacing Lauren in our family. It was about adding what had been absent. Emily brought laughter, easy laughter, and dreams again. I took to finding new recipes to cook for her. She saved the bottles of tea from the cafe where she once worked. Henry often joined us too. As he studied for his bar exam, Emily quizzed him on constitutional law and he teased her about her latte art. The house, once ghosted by silent absence, now hummed with renewed life. A final message from me to you, the viewer who's walked this far. This isn't just a story of betrayal, of secrets and consequences. It's a testament. If you ever felt erased, invisible, forgotten, take heart. Your truth matters. Your voice can't be deleted, only silenced by others. And silence is temporary. Speak it. Stand it. Because even when darkness seems to win, the light you carry within can transform hearts, shatter illusions, and rebuild what was once broken. I didn't seek revenge. I sought justice, not through punishment, but through revelation. And in revealing the truth, I found not just redemption, but belonging. To myself, to family, to legacy. You are worth more than they made you feel, and no one, not even someone who once called you a mistake, can erase your worth.